HOA Karen tried to claim my land. I bought the gate lot and locked her out forever. The first time I saw the fence, I thought it was a mistake. A poorly measured, half-built wooden barrier slicing through the side of my property like it had no right to exist. I had lived on this plot for nearly a decade. The vineyard wasn't just land. It was a patch of freedom, a labor of love, and the place where I could breathe without rules. And now, someone had decided it belonged to them. I walked down to the fence, dust rising from my boots in the morning sun. There she was, clipboard Karen, blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, a glare sharp enough to cut through steel. She was standing with two men in bright vests, measuring tape in hand, arguing with a delivery driver who was trying to make a drop-off on my property. "Excuse me," I called out, approaching them. "Sir, you can't be here during our compliance survey," Karen said immediately, snapping her clipboard shut like a whip cracking in the air. I raised an eyebrow. "This is my land," I said. I'm just following HOA regulations," she stammered, though her voice carried that practiced, condescending tone she probably rehearsed in front of a mirror every morning. I crossed my arms. "You're measuring across my property line, Karen. That fence belongs to you." Her eyes flickered, momentarily unguarded. Then she squared her shoulders. "Not yet, but the board has approved a boundary adjustment. You'll need to comply." I laughed, the sound low and incredulous. "Boundary adjustment? That's news to me. Which board? Which vote? This property is mine. I've paid taxes here for 10 years. Her lips pressed together in that thin line. She wasn't used to being challenged. That much was clear. I watched as the two men in vests continued hammering stakes into the dirt. I stepped forward, placing a hand on the nearest post. "It stops here," I said. "This land is mine. You have no right to claim it." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Oh, you'll comply. Everyone does eventually. Resistance only makes things worse." I shook my head. "Not this time." After a tense moment, they packed up and left, muttering under their breaths. Karen shot me a glare that promised trouble. I didn't care. Not yet. But over the next few days, I began noticing signs that Karen wasn't done. Little things at first. A lost delivery left on the wrong side of the property line. Neighbors telling me about complaints supposedly filed about my landscaping. Even a few anonymous messages slipped under my door warning me to comply or face consequences. It was petty, it was dramatic, and it was Karen. I thought about calling the sheriff again. Dalton, who had saved me before, probably wouldn't believe it was necessary yet. This was her domain, a world where small battles felt enormous and rules were weapons. Then one morning, as the sun barely crested the hills, I drove past the entrance of Willow Creek Estates, the development Karen claimed authority over. There it was, the gate lot. Vacant for years, a small parcel of land that controlled the only proper access point to the fence line she had tried to extend. I realized in that moment that the solution had been staring me in the face. Control the gate, and she couldn't touch my vineyard. I called the realtor immediately. The paperwork was tedious, but within a week, the gate lot was mine. Signed, sealed, and ready for action. Karen didn't know yet. She had no idea that the key to her plan had just slipped out of her hands. I drove back the next morning with a locksmith in tow. By the time Karen arrived, clipboard in hand, ready to issue ultimatums and threats, the gate was locked. Solid, impenetrable, and undeniably mine. Her face turned red the moment she saw it. Her voice shook, though she tried to mask it with authority. This isn't legal." I leaned against my truck, casually sipping coffee. "Oh, it's legal all right. I bought the lot. The gate? Mine. You can't access the fence, the posts, or my property anymore." She opened her mouth again, probably to spew something about compliance or board votes. But no words came. Her assistants glanced at each other, clearly confused. The sense of control that Karen relied on crumbled visibly. Over the next few days, I watched as her frustration grew. Anonymous letters, feigned complaints to the city about access rights, and one particularly ridiculous post on the local HOA forum claiming that the property beyond the gate is unsafe and unregulated. I ignored them all. Let her stew. Neighbors whispered. Some came over, curious about the locked gate. A few congratulated me quietly, telling stories of Karen's overreach and how satisfying it was to see her stopped. I began installing cameras along the fence line and the gate, not because I was paranoid, but because the warning signs were clear. Karen didn't take defeat gracefully, and I had a feeling this wasn't the last we'd see of her. Then, one evening, a small package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single, jagged nail and a note that read, "You've won the battle, but not the war." My stomach tightened. She was escalating. Even with the gate locked, she found ways to send messages, to instill fear, to assert dominance. I called Emma, my neighbor who had always been a source of insight. "Yep," she said after hearing the story. "That's Brenda. She thrives on conflict. You just became the ultimate challenge." I knew she was right. Brenda, Karen, whoever she wanted to call herself, had built a world where rules were her weapons. And now, the rules no longer applied to me. But the tension in the air was palpable. Every time I drove past the gate, I half expected to see her lurking, or one of her loyal HOA minions measuring the fence line, hoping to find some technicality. I started walking the property more frequently, inspecting the fence, checking the vineyard, making sure that nothing could be sabotaged. Night fell quietly, but sleep didn't come easy. The note with the nail sat on my nightstand, a reminder that even victory can come with lingering threats. And so, the stage was set. I had won control over the gate. I had solid legal footing. But Karen's obsession with the property, with control, meant that she wasn't finished. She was just getting started. And somewhere in the shadows of Willow Creek Estates, I knew she was already plotting her next move. I just had to be ready. To watch. To wait. And to defend the vineyard that had been mine all along. That I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing early in the morning. A text from Emma. "You might want to check the HOA forum. Brenda's posting again. This time it's about the gate." I rubbed my eyes and grabbed my coffee, already anticipating the latest round of petty warfare. Sure enough, Brenda had posted a long, dramatic message claiming that the locked gate was illegal and a hazard to the community. The post was filled with vague threats, legal jargon she clearly didn't understand, and passive-aggressive digs at me personally. I sighed. This was exactly what I had expected. Karen never gave up. She thrived on conflict. Every comment on the forum was another arrow shot in her invisible campaign against me. By mid-morning, a few residents had messaged me directly. Some were supportive, quietly cheering my victory over her. Others were cautious, warning me that she was relentless. One neighbor even mentioned seeing her driving slowly down my driveway late at night. I decided it was time to escalate my defenses. Not with anger, not with confrontation, with strategy. I called a local security company and arranged for cameras, motion sensors, and lights around the perimeter. Not just at the gate, but along the fence line that Karen had once tried to claim. I wanted clear, indisputable records if she or her followers attempted anything. Later that day, while checking on the vineyard, I noticed something unusual. A small, freshly disturbed patch of dirt near the back fence. Closer inspection revealed footprints leading away from the property. Too small to be mine. Too precise to be accidental. I snapped photos, documenting every detail. This wasn't just a game to Karen. It was an obsession, and her obsession was becoming increasingly dangerous. That evening, I walked the vineyard again, flashlight in hand. The shadows stretched across the vines like fingers reaching for me. Every rustle of leaves made my pulse quicken. Somewhere in the distance, the faint crunch of tires on gravel. Not my own, not Emma's. I turned sharply, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Just the faint glow of a house in the distance and the whisper of wind. I knew better than to let my guard down. Karen had influence. Powerful friends in the HOA. People who would do her bidding without question. I couldn't underestimate her. Over the next few days, the harassment intensified. Anonymous letters continued to arrive. One contained a single nail, similar to the first. Another, a vague threat about exposing violations. I documented each one, filed them carefully, keeping a paper trail for when the inevitable confrontation happened. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, no one on the other end. Just silence. I answered once, and a faint whisper said, "You can't win." The line went dead. I reported the calls to the local authorities. The sheriff's office suggested I maintain my documentation and avoid any direct confrontation. Dalton called personally the next day. "Just stay calm," he said. "Don't let her provoke you into making a mistake. She's counting on that." I hung up and looked out over the vineyard. The gate was solid. The cameras were operational. Every inch of my property under surveillance. But knowing Karen, I understood that physical barriers were only part of the battle. I decided it was time for a proactive approach. I contacted a local real estate lawyer who specialized in property disputes. We discussed options, from injunctions to cease and desist letters. She advised documenting everything meticulously, which I had already been doing. Then came an unexpected development. A neighbor, previously quiet, approached me cautiously. "Brenda's planning a community meeting," he whispered. "She's framing it as an emergency session about safety and compliance. They might try to vote on access rights to your gate." I nodded slowly. Of course she would. Karen always escalated to the social front once legal or physical barriers were in place. It wasn't enough to be right. She had to control perception. I spent the evening drafting a response strategy. If she tried to manipulate the HOA members, I would be ready. I emailed my lawyer, outlining potential talking points, legal arguments, and documentation. The night before the meeting, another surprise awaited. A text from an unknown number. "You can't lock me out forever. The community will have me in. Watch your back." No signature. No indication of identity. But I knew instantly who it was. Brenda, or someone on her behalf. I took a deep breath. This was it. The next stage. The psychological warfare. Karen's arena. The next morning, I arrived at the community center early. Rows of chairs set up, a long table for the board members. People trickled in, whispering, casting sideways glances. I noticed Karen immediately, clipboard in hand, standing tall as if the room were her stage. Her expression was calculated, smug, dangerous. When the meeting began, she wasted no time. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice sharp, projecting authority. "We have a serious matter regarding the property beyond the eastern fence. Safety concerns have been raised." I raised my hand politely. "I believe there's a misunderstanding. The gate and property in question are legally mine. I have documentation to prove ownership and boundaries." Karen's smile faltered, just slightly. The room shifted. Whispers among the board members. She continued, trying to assert control. "Regardless of ownership, we must consider community safety. This gate prevents emergency access and could be hazardous. We need to discuss potential compliance measures." I remained calm, presenting my evidence clearly, logically, and professionally. Property deeds, maps, photographs, everything indisputable. Some board members shifted uneasily. They hadn't anticipated a homeowner who was prepared. Karen's frustration grew. I could see it in the way her fingers drummed on the clipboard, in the subtle tightening of her jaw. She tried to redirect the discussion, make it about safety, about aesthetics, about community responsibility. But every point I countered with facts. By the end of the meeting, it was clear who had the stronger position. Karen's tone had become restrained, forced. Afterward, she cornered me outside, attempting to maintain some semblance of authority. "This isn't over," she hissed, voice low. I looked her directly in the eye. "I know," I said, "and I'll be ready." I returned to my vineyard, the tension lingering like a storm cloud. Even with the gate secure and the legal victory in hand, the psychological game was far from over. Brenda thrived on influence and control. That night, I walked the property again, flashlight in hand, noting every detail, every potential weak point. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the faintest sounds of movement in the distance. Was it imagination? Or one of her loyal followers testing the boundaries? The message was clear. Karen wouldn't stop. And if she escalated, she would pull out every tool at her disposal. Community influence, anonymous threats, and relentless pressure. But I wasn't afraid. I had the law on my side. I had documentation. I had strategy. And slowly, the realization set in. Victory wasn't about shutting her down entirely. It was about anticipating her moves, countering them calmly, and never giving her the satisfaction of control. From the gate, I watched the horizon. The shadows of Willow Creek Estates stretching toward me. I knew that Brenda's next move was coming. And when it did, I would be ready.